it's incredibly racist. And, I think that's a good kind of segue into White Fragility, which is one of the most toxic books I've ever read in my life. Keri, I slowly descended into madness in the reading of this book. That is not an exaggeration. And I think how I kind of want to start this, and I've been reading this passage quite a bit just because this is at the end of the book. And to me, this just sums up the entire premise of White Fragility. So I just want to read a little bit. If you have the print copy of the book, this starts on page 149. And Robin DiAngelo says, a positive white identity is an impossible goal. White identity is inherently racist. White people do not exist outside the system of white supremacy. This does not mean we should stop identifying as white and start claiming to be Italian or Irish. To do so is only to deny the reality of racism in the here and now. And this denial would simply be colorblind racism. Rather, I strive to be less white. To be less white is to be less racially oppressive. And to me, that passage right there, I was like, that just sums up the entire book. Yeah. All white people are bad. White people are irredeemable. The only way to be anti-racist is to not be white.
Yes, she contradicts herself. Because I had not read to the end, but I saw you highlighted that quote once before, and I saw how contradictory it is. It's funny because at the beginning of the book, she says something, and I can't find it in my notes here, but she says something about how white identity is the antidote. She uses the word antidote to white fragility. Like taking apart white identity is the antidote to white fragility. So white identity is held up as this, like this thing that we have to start to embrace. But at the same time, like you said, it's wholly bad from her point of view. It's wholly bad. And so it can't become good. It's irredeemable. And so how do you strive to be less white? What she really means by striving to be less white is you have to give up your autonomy and become a mouthpiece for her belief system. That's what you have to do. And that's why you see them continually. She's been attacked by the woke mob before because she's a white woman who's making a lot of money off of this belief system. So like Tim Wise, he's a white guy who does similar to Robin DiAngelo, but hasn't blown up recently. But he's also been attacked. He's a white guy who makes a lot of money off of writing and doing lectures and seminars about white privilege and about male privilege. And so they have to continually do this kind of performance of like, I am one of the good white people. I am here criticizing whiteness, my own whiteness and everyone else's whiteness. It's like seeking this absolution that never comes, or this grace or forgiveness that never comes. You just have to sign up to be a foot soldier, and that's the way you address it.
Yeah, and she says that throughout the book. She says, this is a lifelong process of doing the work, and we will never be done. And I guess, you were in this ideology for a long time. And a question that I had in reading this book and in thinking about it is, I don't know what makes this perspective so enticing to people. What is it, Keri, that when people read White Fragility, I feel like a lot of people, and not just this book, but I think this is the book that's out there the most right now. It's being pushed the most right now. What sucks people into this ideology? What is it?
I think it is a desire. Okay, so we talked about how it is itself an ideology, social justice belief system. A lot of people, I think, are lacking a sense of meaning and purpose in their life. And they're lacking, maybe some of them are lacking an ideology. I was when I fell into it, because I had been raised with a belief system. I had been raised Christian, Southern Baptist specifically. I walked away from that over a period of about 3 years. But when I got to college is when I first started encountering all this. This is 20 years ago. They were indoctrinating people 20 years. I mean, they've been doing it for longer than that. They're doing it at younger ages. Now it's like, K through 12, they're getting the stuff that I learned at school, at college. But so I had walked away from my previous belief system, the thing that helped me make sense of how to operate in the world. And I think a lot of people are looking for meaning and purpose, and they mistake this as something good. It sells itself as something good. This is for good people who care about ending racism and sexism and homophobia. This belief system is about being a good person in the world, and it gives them that sense of moral virtue. It's funny because one of the things she wrote at the beginning, oh my gosh, speaking of the moral virtue, she was talking about white fragility, but like a lot of her writing, she tends to give things away about herself or even about her belief system. Yeah, and so there's this part at the beginning where she says, given how seldom, she's talking about white people when she says we, she speaks on behalf of groups.
Exactly.
Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in the society that we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina, socialized into a deeply internalized sense of superiority that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves. We become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very, I can't read that word that I wrote, our very, identities as good moral people. Okay, take that same paragraph and make it about woke fragility. These people are very fragile when you try and have disagreement or discussion, or the whole book was written to prevent you from disagreeing with them so that they could say, white fragility, you can't disagree, white fragility. So I just changed 2 words in here, 3 words. Given how seldom we experience argumentative discomfort in a society we dominate, and they do, this ideology is dominating culturally at the moment. In the past 2 months, it has become dominant. We haven't had to build our argumentative stamina, indoctrinated into a deeply internalized sense of superiority. They do believe they are superior, that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves. We become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider it a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good moral people. And that's what they do. If you challenge this belief system, they're woke fragile.
They are.
And I'm not indicting people based on an immutable identity marker, something they can't change. I'm indicting people based on what they choose to believe. And if they choose to subscribe to this system of belief, a lot of them tend to demonstrate the very fragility she is talking about. But it's not white people, it's any person. All people who subscribe to this system of belief have a problem having conversations. And they go out and they say, we want to have the difficult conversation with you. Again, that's Orwellian. They don't want to have a difficult conversation. They want to preach to you and for you to confess and comply.
That's exactly what they want. And I actually see this in my civil discussion group that I have on Facebook all the time, because I have all sorts of people in there from all different perspectives. And universally, anytime someone that is like more progressive is in the group, I will one day get an email from them saying, Carlin, this group is not really about civil discussion. And I go and I look at their conversation history, and all they're trying to do is preach to people. And then when people don't jump on board, they get upset. And they're like, well, you just don't believe in science. And I'm like, okay, like, you're not trying to have a discussion. You're trying to get people to agree with you. Yeah. And that seems to me to be very aligned with everything I read in this book, which is all about, if you don't buy into these ideas, that is evidence of your white fragility.
Yeah. They don't have any, oh gosh, what's the word for it? I'm blanking on the word, but they don't, she talks about racial humility, having white people need to have racial humility. They don't have any humility when it comes to ideas. So, or to what they consider, how they arrive at what they think is truth. So epistemic, is that the word? I'm blanking on humility. They don't have this. They basically say, they're fundamentalists. They're like religious fundamentalists. This is our system of belief. You must adopt it if you're a good person. And if you don't, then that means you're a bad person, because I know I'm good, and because I'm in it, I'm in this belief system, right? So you are necessarily evil if you don't agree with me. And they can't tolerate discussion. In fact, they attack. Look at what their targets are. Even in this book, I stopped highlighting how many times she openly attacked individualism. They attack individualism. They are opposed to individualism. They're opposed to objectivity. She openly attacks objectivity here, as if you shouldn't seek to try and be objective. even though, you know, we all have, I agree with her. They take some kernel of truth, like we all have biases, but then they apply them universally and say, and they're all this kind of bias and they all operate this way, and you can't be objective.
Yeah, and it's with such smugness. That's what I can't get over about Robin DiAngelo. And I got this from the book, but I also got it from a video I watched from her where she said, it is impossible to not pass judgment on people. And I don't even have the time to explain it, but it is not possible. You're going to have to trust me. And, you know, you're right in that she takes a nugget in that it is very, very true in that we make judgments almost instantaneously on a subconscious basis. But what she doesn't say is you can be mindful of your judgments, stop yourself, and then say, is this the correct way to look at it? And kind of check yourself, try to disrupt your thought process if your judgments are not serving whatever goal you have, whether it's to, you know, build a more fair and equal society, or even just have a better relationship with someone you disagree with. You are very capable, and this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy, to disrupt the judgments you're making and to just take a minute, take a few deep breaths, and start again.
Yeah.